I've been close with David since our teenage years. We've been best friends for almost 30 years. Together, we've navigated high school heartaches, tough job interviews, marriages that thrived and failed, and the gradual shift of life's priorities. So, when she invited me to her family's lake house for the weekend, it felt like a typical get together between old friends. What I didn't anticipate, what I couldn't have foreseen, was the way her brother Mark would look at me that evening. I hadn't seen Mark in years. In our youth, he was the charming younger sibling with a playful grin and a confident attitude. Always the one pulling pranks, snatching cookies from the tray, and flirting with everyone. He was 5 years younger than us, and back then, that gap felt immense. We were adults. He was still a kid. But time, as it does, had closed that gap in surprising ways. I arrived late that Friday evening. The sun was already dipping below the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the dock. The lake shimmered with a copper glow, calm and still. David rushed out to greet me, arms wide, laughing as always. We hugged tightly and warmly, and she led me inside. The house smelled of pine wood and nostalgia. I hadn't been there in over a decade, but everything felt comfortingly familiar. Cozy blankets, faded photos of summer barbecues and childhood swims, and that same old creaky screen door. And then I saw him. Mark was in the kitchen, pouring a glass of wine. He turned when he heard us, and for a moment the room felt still. He had aged, yes, but gracefully. Salt and pepper hair now streaked his once jet-black curls, and his eyes, those piercing hazel eyes, were softer but no less intense. His face had the kind of quiet ruggedness you see in old westerns. Lived in. Genuine. "Elaine," he asked, his voice a little deeper than I remembered. I smiled, adjusting my overnight bag on my shoulder. "In the flesh," I replied. He chuckled and walked over, pulling me into a brief but warm hug. And that's when I felt it. Not just the embrace, but something in the way his arms lingered a beat longer than expected. Something subtle. Something intentional. Later that evening, we sat on the back deck, the three of us watching the stars poke through the velvet sky. David had gone inside to get dessert, leaving me alone with Mark, the sound of crickets humming in the background. "I always thought you were too cool for me," he said suddenly without looking at me. I turned to him, surprised. "You were a kid. You were always more interested in your skateboard than conversations." He smirked. "Maybe, but I still noticed you. You had this quiet strength. I used to watch how you stood up for David when she fought with our parents. You were fearless." I was quiet for a moment, letting his words settle. "Funny," I said finally. "I always thought you never noticed me at all." He turned to face me then, and in that moment, beneath the soft hum of the summer night, the twinkle of stars reflected in the lake, I saw it. That look wasn't overt or aggressive. It was open, vulnerable, like he was seeing me. Not the way I had been, but the way I was now. And that look stirred something in me I hadn't felt in a long time. It's strange how you can go years without someone crossing your mind, only for them to reappear and stir your world like a stone dropped in still water. We didn't speak much after that. David returned, full of laughter and stories, and the moment passed. But I kept catching Mark looking at me throughout the night, not in a way that made me uncomfortable, just curious, like he was rediscovering something he hadn't expected to find. The next day, we all took a walk by the water. The air was fresh, tinged with the scent of pine and lakeweed. David went ahead to take a phone call, leaving Mark and me trailing behind. "You still wear that necklace?" he said, pointing to the small silver charm resting above my collarbone. I looked down and smiled. "Yeah, it was a gift from my late husband. I never take it off." His eyes softened. "I remember when you got it. I was 16. You came over for dinner and he couldn't stop smiling." "Those were good years," I said, my voice low. He nodded. "Do you still feel close to him sometimes?" I admitted. "Other times I feel like I'm slowly learning who I am without him." Mark looked at me with a kind of quiet understanding. Maybe that's the most honest thing anyone can do. We stopped walking. The breeze stirred the branches above us, and a bird flitted through the trees. I looked at him and saw something gentle and grounded in his expression. Not the reckless boy I remembered, but a man who had lived, who had felt the weight of love and loss in his own way. And just then, something shifted. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers brushed my cheek, and my breath caught, not because I was startled, but because I hadn't realized how long it had been since someone had touched me like that. Like I mattered. Like I was seen. I didn't move. Neither did he. The moment stretched between us, taut with unspoken emotion, and just as quickly he stepped back, clearing his throat. "I'm sorry," he said. But he hadn't. Not at all. I just nodded, unable to find the words. That night, I sat alone in my guest room, staring at the moonlit lake through the window. My thoughts were a quiet storm. Memories, feelings, questions I hadn't dared ask myself in years. Something was happening. Something I hadn't expected, and I wasn't sure where it was going. But for the first time in a long time, I was curious enough to find out. The morning sun filtered gently through the thin curtains of the guest room, casting a pale golden glow across the wooden floorboards. I lay in bed longer than usual, listening to the distant sound of birds and the soft creak of the house settling. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the usual urgency to start the day. There was something peaceful about that lake house, something that made time slow down. Maybe it was the stillness of the water or the familiarity of being around people who knew my history. Or maybe it was the way Mark had looked at me again. I wasn't imagining it. At breakfast, the three of us gathered around the old farmhouse table. David was cheerful and chatty, sharing funny stories from work, but I noticed Mark's gaze kept drifting toward me. It wasn't intrusive. It was quite contemplative, like he was trying to figure something out. And I'll admit, I was doing the same. When David went into town to pick up groceries, she offered for me to tag along, but I declined, saying I wanted some time by the water. Truthfully, I needed space to think, so I wandered down to the dock, a book in hand, though I barely opened it. The soft lap of water against the wood, the distant call of a loon. It all lulled me into a reflective calm. A while later, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know it was Mark. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice low. I smiled. Of course not. He sat beside me, just far enough to keep it comfortable, but close enough that I could feel his presence. We sat in silence for a bit, the kind that didn't feel awkward but rather companionable. Then he spoke. "I hope I didn't make you uncomfortable yesterday." I looked at him. "You didn't." He let out a breath as if he'd been holding it. Good, because I meant it. That made my heart beat a little faster. "Meant what?" I asked, though I already knew. That touch, that look. I wasn't just being nostalgic. It wasn't about the past. He turned to face me, the reflection of the lake dancing in his eyes. "It's about now. About seeing you as you are. Strong, beautiful, kind, and real." I wasn't used to hearing words like that. Not since my husband passed. Not since I had quietly closed myself off to the idea of being seen in that way again. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "I just needed you to know." The air between us felt charged, not with lust or expectation, but with a quiet intensity, a raw honesty. It was the kind of moment that could slip away if not acknowledged, so I reached out slowly and rested my hand over his. His thumb gently brushed my skin. We stayed like that, just holding each other's touch as the lake shimmered in the late morning sun. "I haven't felt this way in a long time," I admitted, my voice shaky but true. "Neither have I," he said. "Others, it just sneaks up on me." He nodded. "I lost someone too, a few years back. We weren't married, but we were serious. Cancer, quick and cruel." I looked at him, where he looked beneath the rugged exterior. He carried his own quiet grief, different from mine, but parallel in its weight. And maybe that's what connected us in that moment. Not just attraction, not just nostalgia, but two people who had both lost something and were beginning to wonder if it was possible to feel again. I stood up, walking toward the window. Outside, the moon hung low, casting silver streaks across the water. "Mark," I said, still facing the glass, "what are we doing?" He came to stand beside me. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "But I don't want to pretend I don't feel it. Whatever it is, it's real." I turned to him and our eyes met. There was no pressure, no rush, just a question lingering between us. He leaned in slowly, so slowly I could have stepped away if I'd wanted to. But I didn't. When his lips touched mine, it wasn't fireworks or thunderclaps. It was warm, gentle, exploratory. A kiss that asked, "Are you ready?" rather than, "I want you now." And as I kissed him back, I realized something deep in my chest. I was ready. Ready to feel again. Ready to open that locked door in my heart, if only just a little. When we pulled away, we couldn't say much. There wasn't a need. The moment had spoken for itself. That night, as I lay in bed, I didn't feel guilt or fear, just possibility. The kind I hadn't dared believe in for a very long time. I woke up before sunrise the next morning, not out of restlessness, but because I wanted to see the lake at dawn. There's something about that time of day. The soft blue haze before light fully touches the earth. The stillness that feels like the world is holding its breath. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and stepped quietly onto the back deck. The air was cool and smelled faintly of pine and damp earth. Mist rolled off the lake's surface like a secret being whispered into the sky. And then I heard the door creak behind me. Mark. He didn't say anything right away, just joined me, handing over a warm mug of coffee, which I took with a quiet nod. His presence felt easy now, like he belonged there beside me, sharing the silence. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "Me neither." We stood together, the blanket around my shoulders brushing his arm. Every time the breeze shifted, there was something sacred about that moment. No grand declarations, no rushing forward, just two people slowly stepping out of their separate shadows. He turned toward me after a long stretch of quiet. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you." I looked at him, searching his face for any trace of insincerity. There was none. "I know this is complicated," I said softly. "David, she doesn't know, and I don't even know what this is yet. I'm not asking for answers," he replied. "I just want to be honest with you." I swallowed hard, the warmth of the coffee grounding me. "We've both been through too much to play games," I said. "So let me be honest, too. This feels real and terrifying, but also kind." That word lingered between us. Kind. It wasn't about thrill or infatuation. It was about finding something gentle in a world that hadn't been so gentle for a long time. That morning, we didn't kiss. We didn't touch. We simply were, and that in itself felt more intimate than anything physical. But of course, the quiet couldn't last forever. David returned around noon from town. She burst through the door with the same energy she always had, arms full of fresh fruit and weekend gossip. She didn't notice the subtle shift between Mark and me. Not yet. But I was aware of every glance, every pause, every stolen smile. Later that afternoon, the three of us went kayaking. The sun was bright, glittering on the water, and David was laughing as she tried to steer with her usual lack of coordination. "I've missed this," David called out ahead. All of us beamed together. Mark looked at me. "Me too," he said. But the way he said it wasn't about nostalgia. It was about now. That evening, after dinner, David went to bed early, claiming a headache. I offered to help clean up, and Mark stayed behind, drying dishes beside me in the warm glow of the kitchen. Our hands brushed once and then again. "I think we need to talk," I whispered. He nodded, drying his hands on a dish towel, then leaning back against the counter. "I care about her. She's my best friend," I said. "If she knew something was happening between us, it would change everything." Mark nodded slowly. "I get that, but let me ask you something." I looked up. "If we didn't do anything, if we kept pretending there was nothing here, would it hurt any less? Would it make it not real?" I bit my lip. No, it wouldn't. He stepped forward, close enough that I could feel the heat from his body, but still keeping just enough distance to let me decide what came next. "We don't have to rush this," he said. "I don't want to hide it, but I also don't want to do anything that would hurt you or her." I nodded. "Maybe we just take it one moment at a time." He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made you feel safe. That night, I didn't sleep in my guest room. But I didn't sleep in his either. We ended up back out on the deck, a blanket between us, watching the stars. Our shoulders touched, and our hands found each other beneath the fabric. There was no urgency, no pressure, just comfort, warmth, a deepening trust that didn't need to be named to be understood. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I rested my head on his shoulder and closed my eyes. "I don't know what tomorrow brings," I murmured. "Neither do I," he replied. "But for tonight, I'm right here." The next morning arrived wrapped in gold. I woke up on the deck, the blanket still pulled over us, my head resting against Mark's shoulder. The lake was glassy and pale. The world hushed, as if holding its breath for what came next. I didn't move at first. I didn't want to. There was a comfort in the quiet rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his arm around my back, and the soft stir of the trees above us. For the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to go wrong. I felt present. Eventually, we sat up. He stretched and smiled at me, that soft morning smile people only share before the world demands their attention. "I could get used to this," he said. I didn't reply, just reached for his hand. But reality, as it always does, came knocking soon enough. David found us on the deck an hour later. She stepped out carrying 2 mugs of coffee, already halfway through a story about a ridiculous squirrel that had made its way into the pantry. And then she paused. Her eyes flicked from me to Mark, our proximity, the way our fingers slowly slid apart, but not fast enough to be unnoticed. She didn't say anything. Not then. She simply handed me the mug and sat down beside us. Quiet. We didn't speak about it all morning, though I felt the shift like a tremor under my skin. By afternoon, I couldn't avoid it anymore. I found David on the back porch, sitting alone, legs curled up beneath her. Her gaze was focused on the trees, but I knew her thoughts were elsewhere. "Can I sit?" I asked. She nodded. I lowered myself beside her, the tension between us crackling like distant thunder. "I should have told you," I began. "About me and Mark. I didn't mean to hide it. I wasn't sure what it was yet. I still don't know what it is." She didn't speak for a long time, just sipped her tea and stared out into the forest. "He's my brother," she finally said. "And you're my best friend. It's a strange thing to imagine you together." "I know," I said quietly. "Believe me, I didn't expect it either." But she continued, turning to me. "I also know what you've been through. I know how lonely the nights have been for you. I've seen it in your eyes, even when you smile." I blinked back tears. "And if someone," she added, her voice breaking just slightly, "if someone is giving you a reason to feel alive again, I would never stand in the way of that." I reached for her hand and she didn't pull away. "Thank you," I whispered, but she said with a small smirk, "I am going to need a little time to get used to the idea." I laughed, a short surprise sound that felt like release. Fair enough. We sat in silence for a while after that. Not awkward, but companionable. Like we had broken through something deeper and come out the other side more honest with one another. That evening, Mark and I took one last walk along the lake before I left. The sun was setting, spilling warm amber light across the water. The path was quiet, only the crunch of pine needles beneath our feet and the occasional call of a distant bird. "I'm not expecting a fairy tale," I said softly. "I'm not offering one." He replied with a smile. "Just something real, something worth exploring." I turned to him, taking his hand. "I want that too." He leaned in and kissed my forehead. Not a passionate kiss, not dramatic, but tender, loving. When it was time to say goodbye, there were no promises, no dramatic scenes, just a long hug that lingered with all the meaning neither of us needed to say out loud. As I drove away from the lake house, the sky darkened behind me, and the road stretched quiet and open ahead. And I thought about everything that had happened, about what it means to love again. Not with youthful abandon, but with the wisdom of someone who has already known loss. I thought about Mark's quiet strength, the way his presence felt like a steady current instead of a crashing wave. And I thought about myself, about how much I had closed off and how maybe, just maybe, I was beginning to open back up again. Not for someone else, but for myself.